You're listening to Let's Talk Sustainable Business.
Hello, my name is Uwe Schulte, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this episode of our series, Let's Talk Sustainable Business, which is brought to you by the Conference Board Global Sustainability Center. Today, I'm welcoming back Thomas Udesen, Chief Procurement Officer at Bayer. In our last episode, Thomas gave us an overview of the development of transition and the transition towards their vision, health for all, hunger for none. We also discussed the challenges of the merger and divestments of the recent past and how procurement is engaging in the sustainability agenda and how Bayer is collaborating with others. So welcome back, Thomas.
Thank you, Uwe, and it's wonderful to be back.
Yeah, it took us a little bit longer because of the holiday period. Hopefully our audience will forgive us for that. But in contrast to our audience, I actually see you, and I see that you're well rested and had a nice holiday. So that's great. So let's
also compliment you on your wonderful tan. It seems you had a good time too.
Yeah, gardening. Okay, Thomas, we should dive a little bit deeper into the vision that Bayer has and how procurement is contributing. You talked about how you work together with others. And in my experience, many of these collaborations are excellent, giving suppliers clear procedures and expectations. But when we are looking at the impact, take, for example, progress versus paying living wages, not a lot of progress has been made so far. How do you see that?
I think every organization probably has their different levers as far as what's relevant in terms of impact. And I think one of the most basic actions that organizations should have is exactly to establish where is it that we can have a positive impact on our society around us. And certainly the supply base is of significant scale for most of the organizations. We have, of course, just by the nature of our business, we have different areas where we have a big impact. Being in the agricultural business, it's obvious that we have big impacts when it comes to topics like child labor, on making efficient use of water, minimizing the deforestation that we also see across the world. And behind each of those topics, we have programs. We have had programs for decades in many of these cases, and we of course make sure we engage with local NGOs to have let's say the positive impact that we think we should have in those topics. Looking at the supply chain, though, there's of course other dimensions that become relevant. Many of us are looking at the environmental dimension. Bayer, as you also heard last time, has signed up for the Science-Based Target Initiative. So the whole decarbonization topic is a very, very large thing. But again, it's not all of that. Deforestation, the packaging impact, labor conditions, how do we make sure that we are inclusive with our supply base? How do we have supplier diversity part of our roadmap? And these are the ones that we are then, as procurement, focusing more on with the way that we are creating categories, with how we engage with our suppliers.
Let's put it to the crunch, Thomas. When a procurement guy is measured, so he has his targets, and anybody who's worked in procurement knows that cost saving is always a given target. Has he other targets that relate to these sustainability ambitions, and how is it measured?
Yeah, so I think the code of conduct and the minimum expectations is a way of avoiding that you have too many of those trade-offs that you are describing. I think we have very clear guidance as far as minimum expectations. So that's part of the assessments, even before you get invited to a tender. It's how we assess our suppliers. But then you get into the actual crunch, the sourcing event. And of course, sustainability has a big rating in many of those matrices towards the decision. So in that way, you are also able to swing a product that may cost a little bit more, but it provides a favorable status when it comes to sustainability, and with that we make better decisions. You can of course make that even more concrete by also introducing, internal carbon prices. We are doing that, for example, for all our capex, where we are really assessing, is this now a configuration that brings us the best long-term environmental footprint or not? So you can put in those externalities into your decision making, and we have done that for many parts of the organization. Of course, we'll continue to look at where else does it make sense to do that. So when our procurement ladies are making those decisions, they are convinced that she's also making a better decision.
You're just tempting me, but you don't have to answer the question. What internal carbon price you're using, that might be confidential, but
I don't think so. I think we use 100 per ton, and of course we recognize that this is maybe not the perfect figure. You can probably have a whole bunch of scientists try to calculate this, and we will come back next Christmas and still not be any cleverer. So we are looking at it very pragmatically. We're introducing it as a measure right now, and we are assessing as time progresses, do we need to change that, increase it, reduce it, etc.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing, because I think more and more of us are facing that issue, and if we don't use that, then we probably invest into the wrong technologies in the future. So that whilst the EU is trying to do this with taxonomy, I think being very clear about your own business model will help. Now, let's get a little bit more to the crunch. One of the things you do is you produce seeds, right?
That's correct. We have we have tens of thousands of smallholders who are producing seeds for us as well.
That's exactly my point, because I think a lot of people still believe, these are these huge farms that produce that, but actually a lot of our agriculture is still smallholder farmers. And how do you, as a large conglomerate as you are, engaging with them on a decent platform? Can you describe that?
Yeah, so of course, first of all, we are managing a lot of those relationships very locally, because it's typically co-located with our seeds reception centers. And here we are, of course, then also part of the local economy. So we help educate with our agronomists as far as how do you get the biggest yield? How do you utilize resources optimally, whether it is the crop protection or also the water usage, so that again we minimize the environmental impact. And it's certainly one of the topics which, of course, in many developing countries is front of mind, is how do we make sure that we eliminate child labor into their fields and make sure that the children go to school and they are not being utilized as a labor force in the fields. And this is not something we do alone. This is something we do in a multi-stakeholder environment where local NGOs, local regulators, educational facilities are educating those farmers to make sure that we eliminate those risks. So it's a very community engaged program that we have, and that goes across multiple geographies where they have specific challenges around this.
Yeah, you see, the issue with smallhold farmers, as you no doubt know, is they have to first finance, the seeds, the chemicals they need to do, and it takes them a while to actually reap the benefits. And therefore, there were, of course, initiatives to make sure that loans are not done by sharks, but in a decent way. Are you, as a company, engaged in that, or how does that work?
But most of these relationships are, if not multi-generational, it's multi-year, decades long. So these are partnerships that are going on for extended periods. And of course, we make sure that these commercial aspects also around access to funding and cash flows are such that it's attractive for everybody, and sort of the abusive behavior that probably exists in certain parts of the supply chains is is not representing the values we stand for, and that's certainly not practices we believe in. In fact, as part of our sustainability strategy, we are also looking at ways to engage 100 million smallholders and give them access to modern technology in a way that, again, they can utilize their land for bigger yields. This is separate. These are different smallholders, but the group of smallholders, and I think we know they are the biggest producer of food around the world. It's a super critical group for humanity, and we understand that and partner with them.
In your vision, you talk about hunger for none at the moment. That is, again, a huge challenge that we're facing. How do you see the situation in Sahel and other parts of the world? Are we going to manage that issue, or, I mean, the crop that comes out of Ukraine is slow? Huh?
Yeah, no, we are very concerned about the trajectory on food production, and that's also one of the reasons why we continuously argue that we need to have a multi-stakeholder dialogue around how do we increase yields without damaging the environmental footprint. And we strongly believe it is through a combination of science, where we also adopt new technologies in this quest that we all have. Because failure to increase yield on reducing arable land will of course mean that it's not the, 600 million people who is undernourished today. Those figures will increase dramatically. So we're deeply concerned that right now things are not going in the right direction. The conflict in Ukraine, Russia, of course, where we've seen limitations on availability, and where the grains coming out of Ukraine is blocked. It doesn't necessarily mean that Europeans don't get the food that they are needing and also often able to pay for. This really impacts populations in Middle East, in East Africa, who are totally dependent on this food, and of course have absolutely no way of paying for it. So it is a big challenge for us as a world community, and we want to have this constructive dialogue with everybody. A lot of it is going on, and of course most of this is not directly impacting procurement, as you can appreciate, but we certainly see this as our aspiration. Hunger for none. It's a bold aspiration, and we are not there.
No, definitely not. The other part, maybe you speak a little bit to that as well, which is health for all. How does that relate to procurement?
Well, it's also, of course, making sure that our products, our technologies are available, that we do innovate into new modalities, into new diseases where so far there are no cures available for humanity, and we have many areas where we are novel in our solutions. We are having trials in areas such as Parkinson, where there is no current cure, and of course we believe that through science and through some of these investments we are also making, whether it's biotech or also through more traditional small molecules, that we will be able to pursue the elimination of diseases where we simply today don't have the solutions.
Let me come back to the procurement part, of course. So in the past, I have seen it very often that the knowledge around sustainability in the commercial function as such, and not just procurement, and procurement is not just a commercial function, it's of course a logistical one as well, but there are aspects missing, and of course sustainability is a very complex thing. People very often look for black and white, and nothing is black and white in this field, as you and I know. Maybe we take scope 3, and let me just explain as a background for the audience. I think most of them will be insulted, but let me say it again. if you procure your energy, if you produce your energy yourself, scope 1. If you procure your energy directly, that's scope 3. But if energy is involved in the process of procuring goods or in the use of your products, that's scope 3. Now, for procurement, of course, the upstream supply chain is the important one. And in my experience, a lot of companies are struggling to even identify the size of the issue. How do you go about that?
Yes, it's true. And just in terms of relative importance, you will know that most manufacturing organizations are having 80% plus of their carbon footprint in scope 3. So this is where you win or you lose the battle, and that's of course why organizations, ours included, focus a lot on scope 3. And getting the baseline is problem number 1. And one of the challenges here is also that the world hasn't necessarily established a standard. How do you really calculate this? Because this is not a simple task. It's billions of calculations to get the accuracy that we desire. So what do? We have taken one of the models that exists, and we have, of course, assessed our carbon footprint through models, so spend-based models. It's almost step number 1, where you look at, this is our spend, these are the averages of spend and the averages of the averages, and that gets you a baseline that you can work with. We have then complemented that with real data that we have collected from our suppliers using the Carbon Disclosure Project as an enabler. But you can build accuracy as you go along. And that's helped us quite a bit. What we are intending to do, and you're also familiar with Together for Sustainability, is actually here on the 15th of September, we will launch the first ever global standard for product carbon footprint calculations. This is the guide. This is how you do it for the chemical industry. And of course, we know that the chemical industry is the foundation for pretty much all industries. And with that, we can positively drive towards a standard that we can start to compare apples with apples. We haven't done that on our own. We have worked with the NGOs, SBTI, World Economic Forum, all those entities who, like us, wants to create a common methodology. So those are steps that our teams are taking to, let's say, get the baseline and now go from 80% accuracy to 81 to 82 and move on. That's of course nice. We have a baseline. More important is, what are we going to do about it, and how do we now reduce? And this has to happen in parallel. And that's where, as you mentioned, messaging towards suppliers, making sure we change the choice to be more energy efficient, that this is part of our everyday decisions that procurement practitioners do.
Yeah, you see, this is very interesting, because I see, and I'm very glad that more and more companies are asking, for example, their suppliers to use renewable energy. There are two issues with that. It's not only renewable energy, because some of their processes produce a lot of CO2, much more than the energy. And the second thing, if we all go around, there is not enough renewable energy around at the moment. So I think large companies like yourself have to help creating situations and infrastructure that will actually enable that progress.
Yeah. No, I agree. And of course, if there's a market, if there's demand, supply will be created. And most of these big PPAs, so the power purchase agreements that we are signing up for, are multi-year commitments, which of course gives the energy providers of renewable energy the economic assurance that they need to make the necessary investment. So it's moving along nicely. We are certainly on plan, if not ahead of plan. Our commitment is to have 100% renewable energy for what we are buying externally by 2030. We are, I think, 25-30%-ish right now globally. And of course, we also see that in a way is shielding us from the gas situation that has been, created by Putin and the limitations we see now in Germany.
Yeah, no, I agree. it would be great to continue that conversation about what you're doing in these fields, but you've done something personally, which I'm very impressed by, and I would like to discuss that a little bit more with you. I talked about the fact that in the commercial function, the knowledge around sustainability sometimes lets a little bit to be desired. And you have been one of the founders of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. What is this?
So what is a Sustainable Procurement Pledge? Maybe, how did it come about? And we were inspired. So my co-founder is Bertrand Concouret from Henkel. He's a CPO of Henkel, and like yourself, we believe strongly that businesses and procurement in particular carries an enormous power in driving business to business, world trade towards good or not. And often the decision sits with us in the moment when we make deals, we shake hands, we give people contracts to execute. And we have seen progress over the last decade, but we also have to say that things are not moving fast enough. Whilst 15,000 organizations have signed the UN Global Compact, we see thousands of organizations having signed the Science-Based Target Initiative. If you talk to practitioners sitting across the world, asking them, what exactly are you doing? Often the answer is unsatisfactory and unacceptable. So when the global climate change took place in October 19, we were inspired to say, let's do something about it. Let's make sure we go back to the basics, the principles from United Nations Global Compact, the 10 principles, which is all sound business principles that all of us would understand. Our parents would have taught us that exactly as children. Don't do bad things, be nice, don't overuse resources, etc. Those principles we condensed into 5 things, actions that we can do as procurement practitioners. And we launched that. And I've seen since then the world of procurement respond overwhelmingly positive. So we believe there's around 1 million procurement people on the planet, and they control world trade, 8.7 trillion business to business. And our simple plan is to make sure that we give them the tools that they require, to equip them to make better decisions. How to calculate scope 3, how do you engage your suppliers, how do you maybe include social procurement, social businesses, and that's what it is. We are capacity building procurement practitioners. Now we are a little bit moving forward 3 years or so as a total volunteer organization. We have chapters in most parts of the world. 142 countries have active members. We are 8,000 ambassadors. And now, of course, we have to grow up. So we are professionalizing. We have found organizations who is prepared to donate, our nonprofit. And with us, we are literally days away from hiring our first employee, the executive director, that will then be helping the world of procurement with the answers that they need. And you are maybe familiar with in the academia, there's Khan University, right? There's also the guy who wanted to make everything available for free. That's what we want to do. We want to help the people who sit in an organization in a remote place, maybe, that doesn't have a boss that takes this seriously, that they can start a positive change from within their organizations.
So basically, your objective is capacity building. Is that what this is about?
Capacity building, and the fallout consequence is that we will all make sure that the United Nations SDGs that are behind you, that those targets are delivered by 2030. So we see this as a task until 2030 to make sure that the SDGs are delivered, and we all can look back with pride when future generations ask us, what did you do when things looked a bit dark? Were you part of the solution, or did you contribute to the problem? We want to make sure that procurement contributes to the solution.
Excellent. By the way, you just said the SDGs that are behind you. We are in a podcast, so people don't see that. What do you see on the video? That I'm a critical supporter of the SDGs. I believe that we're not making enough progress, and I also believe that certain things are not covered, but they are a common denominator. Everybody can talk about them, and as long as people are not box ticking them, but actually trying to make an impact on one or two of them, that is absolutely sufficient. And Thomas, I have to congratulate you, because there are two guys. They take the initiative, and 2 years later, what did you say? 8,000?
8,000, yes.
Yeah. People have engaged. They call themselves ambassadors, or you call them ambassadors. I think that's a nice word. And I would like to use this podcast also to advertise this. So just say your website, and if people then go there, they can sign up and commit themselves.
Yeah. So the content, so what we are crowdsourcing from our global community of practitioners and academics is spp.earth, and our actual counting on the number of ambassadors is the LinkedIn group. So if you check the Sustainable Procurement Ambassadors on LinkedIn, you will see there's a group, and please join. It's very active. We are 8,000, and it's of course we created. Some of you may be familiar, but we also saw that everybody has a day, right? And we don't have anyone as the sustainable procurement. So this year, we launched the first World Sustainable Procurement Day, and it's on Equinox. It's the 21st of March, and it's going to be the 21st of March until 2030. We will come together, and we will have 24 hours. We follow the sun around the equator, and make sure that we have discussions, content. We try to have something for everybody as the sun turns around the equator, and through this we capacity build, and we create this community. Because it's not just knowledge; it's also courage. It's building a vocabulary. It's seeing role models who have done it, who fell on their nose and got up and in a way made a lesson and moved on. We need that courage to also drive positive change, and that's what the communities are doing. We are launching chapters in most countries. We are launching chapters in industries. We're having chapters in topics like you mentioned, Scope 3, etc. So we're creating this 3-dimensional community platform for procurement, by procurement, safe space, where we can share our knowledge and in a way help each other to drive progress.
Excellent. What I like about it as well is the positive outlook. I mean, when a lot of people who look around, they now see all these issues, the crisis, the climate crisis, the war, the increased block building that's going on, the issues about impact of severe weather events, the pandemic. So we're facing lots of crises at the same time, and you can start to despair. But what you guys are doing, you say, we are active, we can influence things, and we will do our part. And nobody has to do a huge lift, but everybody lifts a little bit in the right direction. That, I think, is your idea, and I can just applaud you for that.
Yeah, I mean, 1 million procurement practitioners that are lifting, together will make a difference. And with 8,000, we are almost there. There's only 992,000 missing. So we are on a good path. And it's tempting at times to despair. It is. We are all clear. We read the same news. But then I think you have to be reminded of the gravity. What are we talking about? We are talking about securing a great life for future generations. Many of us have children. It's their life we are talking about. So you can't give up. We can't give up. We will fight, hopefully not to the end.
Absolutely. And that's a very nice last word here on this podcast. I thank you very much for that, Thomas. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for pushing the procurement pledge. And I wish you all success with that. And for our listeners, thank you for listening today. And please subscribe to our podcast series or explore the entire catalog of podcast programming from the Conference Board. You can also write to us at sustainability@tcb.org. Thank you for listening, and join us again when we look at business aspects of sustainability. Goodbye.
That was Let's Talk Sustainable Business.